Well, there's an issue that's come up in our workshops, and it has resulted from our courses on the Academy, and it just keeps popping up, so I want to help you resolve that today. That issue is, what do you do when you think a color is something like tan and you don't know how to get it? Let's do it and see what happens. Well, when you're just trying to mix a color and trying to guess at it because you don't know exactly what to put in it to mix it, it can be a real problem and a headache. And then when you finally do get that color, sometimes you don't remember how you got it. Well, let's solve that problem. Most of the colors that you call tan or ivory or brown, even the colors that we know such as burnt umber or burnt sienna, yellow ochre, all those colors are not hue names. They don't tell us what hues we need to create those colors. And all of those just happen to be in the neutral zone. So one of my students asked me during a workshop, how can I learn how to read those colors as hues? And so I've got this exercise that I gave them and want to give you to help you to learn how to read those generic colors that have no hue name, how to read them as hue. You train your eyes to see this, so let's start with the orange range. Those are usually found, well, they're found in the cool range on the wheel, but most of the ones that people have real trouble with are located on the warm side. So let's just take that center of the warm side, which is orange, and let me show you how to create that neutral range that goes from the high saturated orange to the most neutral orange without changing the value. And let me show you this exercise so then you can learn how to do this, and you can do the same exercise with all the colors on the color wheel. And by doing the exercise, you can train yourself how to see what these things are. And then when you recognize one that you've created, you'll know how to make it. So let's jump right to it. Now, orange on the color wheel is a combination of course, yellow and red, but it's also a combination of yellow orange and red orange. And those are the two I have on my palette. But what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to take some red orange, which is cadmium red light. Now, if you will think of color first as its color name, then as the tube name, I said red orange and cadmium red light. In that order, think of them in that order. You will retrain your thinking process to make color mixing much easier for you. So I'm going to add just enough yellow on the wheel, yellow to the red orange to turn it orange. So that's the first step. So I'm going to do that. If you have cadmium orange, you can just use cadmium orange. But what I'm going for here is the highest saturation of orange. So I'll just do this. This is Hansa yellow light. The yellow that I'm mixing into this red orange is Hansa yellow light. Now let's see, does that change it enough to be orange, or is it still red orange? That's pretty close. I think I probably hit that one on that nail on the head. Now, going across from the color wheel, this is the exercise for you. Start with any one from red, orange, yellow, orange, and yellow. Or even starting with red, violet. You could start with any one of these colors, then start out with the highest saturation that you have of that color. So that's what I've done here. This is the highest saturation of orange that we can see. So now what I need to do in order to change that, neutralize it or desaturate it, I need its complement. Orange's complement is blue. Well, the blue I have, well, let's say we have ultramarine blue and phthalo blue are the two most common dark transparent blues. Cobalt blue is another one. But if it's a blue that leans more towards violet, then that would be ultramarine blue. If it's a blue that leans more towards green, then that would be phthalo blue. So I'm going to take ultramarine blue first. Now I'll just put ultramarine blue right over here for the time being. If I go ahead and throw that into this, I'm going to change the value as well as change the saturation. So what I want to do is to create an exercise where I don't change the value. I only change the saturation. In order to do that, we must value correct, means change the value, raise the value of this color to be in the same value range as this color. And to do that, white is our best friend. So what I'll do is I'll put white right beside this and gradually pull ultramarine blue into white. Now then, here comes another problem. A lot of people have trouble seeing the value comparison between a very cool color and a very warm color. In other words, to see the value comparison of this to this. So when I think I've reached that this value right here of my mixture, I'm going to show you how you can test that out. And many times we can solve color problems very, very easy if we just stop and do some little tests or some little exercises or some little trial things away from the painting, somewhere else. So, I'm wondering, have I got a value here that is pretty much the same value level as this? Now, here's the way I can find that out. I can start, get a piece of, in this case, I'm just going to get a piece of canvas because it will show the mixture better. Just get a piece of canvas. I'm going to put it right here. Okay, what I'll do is I'm going to put some of this orange here, wipe off my palette knife, and I'm going to pick up some of this. Now, when I mix these two together, when I begin to mix them together, if it gets lighter, then that means I got that too light. If it gets darker, as I'm pulling this orange into it, if it gets darker, then it means I've got that one too dark. If it stays, as I continue to pull that orange into it, if it stays the same value, as you see that is doing, I just happen to hit it right. If it stays the same value, then I know I've got the right value. Now that's a nice little test you can do to visually make that decision, so you don't have to do one part this and two parts that. That never works in color. Anyway, okay, there's the first thing. From this point on, I'm going to use a brush. I'm going to take the color wheel down. Here's the exercise. Then I do need paper towel in my hand to have certain controls we have to do. You know that Leonardo believed that rather than thinking of science and art as two separate fields, that when we can blend science and art, that's when we begin to really use them both to our benefit. So I'm going to call this a science experiment because it really is. So I can start out right here. Now there is the orange in its highest saturation. Now the next step is to reach it and just for a little bit of blue. I pull off the excess on the brush, reach for just a little bit of blue on the tip of that brush. And what I want is just a very gradual change in saturation. And so I'll keep pulling that orange into this until I have a gradual change in saturation. Now, this interesting thing about saturation, here we go right there. There is the next level up. There is the next, the first desaturation of orange. What we are actually doing when we add blue into orange or when we add any complement into another is we are subtracting this color out. So when I add blue, I subtract the hue. I'm subtracting the hue out. Now, if you see this color by itself, just this color without the orange, you see that by itself, what would you call it? You might call it a burnt sienna, almost, maybe a burnt sienna that has a little white in it. Uh, but you might have other names for it. We might see if you're looking for a color to paint something and you're in the paint store, you may see that called about anything. But if you learn to call it, recognize it as desaturated orange, when you see that color, that's a brick. It's a really a kind of a brick orange, isn't it? If you learn to think of that as desaturated orange, you'll know that in order to get that, all you have to do is add a little bit of blue to a fully saturated orange at the same value level, or whatever value it is. We could be doing this in any value up to about the middle, be just beyond the middle value. We reach a point that when it becomes really, really dark, we can't see the hue anymore very well. But we can, there's a long range of value on the value scale where 1 is the lightest light. We can do this all the way 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, at least 7, possibly 8 too, and still see the hue. Beyond that, it's too dark. We can't really see much hue in it anyway. All right, now I'm going to reach in again, and here's the same thing. And now at this point becomes the same activity. I want to desaturate this just a little bit more. And you don't even have to say how much more. Just want to desaturate it till it's just visibly less saturated than this is. And let's see if I got that. Or did I have too much orange there? I think I could add just a little bit more blue into that. Into the same pile. Don't pull more orange in here now, because if you start pulling more orange into this exercise, into this mix, it just makes it more saturated. You start going backwards. Let's try this mixture. There we go. All right, there is another degree of desaturation of orange. So there you go. Now we've got 3. Now if you only looking at that, only see that color and nothing else to identify it beside it. If you can recognize that as desaturated orange, you may see this in the woods, or you might see it in almost any place. But instead of calling it tan or whatever other color you might be tempted to call it, if you can recognize it as desaturated orange, you'll know in order to achieve that color, all you have to do is desaturate orange or use some hue out of the tube that's a desaturated orange. So I'm going to go at this again. Let's desaturate it another increment. Just another increment, just adding a little bit more blue into just this mix, not adding any more of this into it, into just this mix. And let's see. I'm going to take this as gradual as I can to show you. I didn't get that very much more desaturated. I'm going to add just a little bit more. To go a little bit more aggressively. And just keep working until I see that saturation make a significant change in saturation. There it is right there. All right, now we have another. Well, there's not quite the degree of saturation, really. So that, I tell you what's causing that. Ultramarine blue is a very low tinting strength. Cadmium red light is a very high tinting strength. So as we get more and more desaturation, or get it more and more desaturated, in proportion, it's going to take more of the ultramarine blue into this. So that's why that desaturation, there we go. Now it went down another notch. There we go, right there. So now, if you saw this one by itself, what would you call it? Some people might even I can see that as skin tone. If you compare this right here with the shadow part of my hand, you see that nice skin tone there? If you see it by itself, a skin tone doesn't tell you what color you need to mix, does it, to get it? But then if you can recognize that, you see the orange in it. Almost all the orange is gone now. Remember, that's what we do. We subtract hue out when we desaturate. So almost all the orange is gone. And probably the next desaturation we do will take all the orange out. Let's see if it will. And I think if you do this very slowly in increments like this, rather than try to make it a gradation, where you just blend one into the other, but if you can see those increments, I think that helps you to identify. Then if you see that color isolated out and you didn't have any more clues, if you do this exercise enough, you will be able to recognize that as the orange in it. And we know that beautiful skin tones are made with different saturations and desaturations and values of orange and red orange and yellow orange. So there you go. Now what am I doing? Oh yes, all right. See, let's see if the next one, is the next one going to have all the orange removed? Almost, I believe so. Almost. I see just a hint of orange left in there. Well, maybe that's because I'm looking at this, but that's very, very close to neutral. Now, what happens next, if we continue that, which we're not going to do in this quick tip, but if we were to continue that, then we would begin to see blue appear. And then blue would appear in a very desaturated form, then a little bit more saturated, and a little bit more saturated, and a little bit more saturated, until we would have a fully saturated blue at this value level. But remember, that's this particular value level that we're working with, because we can get this same kind of desaturation, higher values, lighter values. All we would do is be adding more light. Start out with a lighter color here in the saturated form. For going darker, we'd start out with a darker color here. Of course, when we make it lighter, make it darker, it's not as saturated as it is when we take it at its fullest saturation. But I'm going to take one more now. Let's just see. Let's see. Is it going to begin to turn blue now? Or is it going to be fully neutral? Meaning is that all the orange is gone. Just keep working it and let's see what happens here. Aha, I believe this is it. Well, it's somewhere in between there. All the orange is gone for sure. It may be beginning to lean a little bit more towards blue, but I think we can probably call that the neutral. So that's it. Now, if you take yourself through this exercise for every color on the color wheel, you will be surprised at how it's going to sharpen your ability to recognize when you see these colors isolated, like that one. You see this one isolated. See that one probably appear in the forest in the winter an awful lot. You will be able to recognize that as a desaturated orange when you get your eyes trained to see these degrees of saturation, and stop calling it tan and brown and stuff like that. Start using the hue names to identify it. That too helps. Give it a try. See what you think. Be sure to view all of our quick tips. And while you're doing so, subscribe to the channel, click on the bell so you'll always get a notice when we produce a new quick tip, which is every week. And if you have a question, leave it in the comments section and we'll make a quick tip for you. Also, take a trip over to DianneMize.com where I have full-length lessons, downloads, DVDs, lots of other stuff there, some free stuff for you. And while you're there, you can subscribe to the newsletter, and that way you'll always be informed every time we do something new. All God's children got sound, except those God's children ain't got no sound.